Here at the Pink Grape, I interview winemakers from all over the world. Our purpose is to have fun, be entertained, discover new wines, and meet great people. I hope you will join our journey around the wine world by subscribing to my channel. If you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and please enjoy the interview. Mark, welcome to the show, The Pink Grape. It's a pleasure having you on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I really like your poster.
Thank you. Yeah, I got the pink grapes, right? Name of the show. And then I got the devil eating grapes. I saw it online. I was like, oh, I got to buy that. No, thank you for being on the show. Really excited to learn more about you and about your wines. So I'd like to start with that. How did you become a winemaker?
Well, I really truly fell into this job. I was 20 years old and looking for a job, and I was previously in the construction trade, did a lot of crazy things. Like I was a hod carrier for a bricklayer. I did a bunch of concrete work and, really hard physical labor. But at the time, you'd get laid off and, I felt like I was always looking for a job. And so I ended up getting hired at two places at the same time, the same day. And one of them was at a rebar factory here in Livermore. I live in Livermore, California. And the same day I was hired by Winty Brothers Winery. And the funny thing about it was, at the time, the rebar paid $6 an hour and Winty paid $5.50, but I chose Winty for some reason. I think it was because it was so completely different than rebar and concrete and hod carrying and whatnot. So immediately, they were a great company to work for. They embraced me and felt like I was learning something new every day. At the time, I didn't even know there was such thing as Pinot Chardonnay, or, at the time we made a lot of Grey Riesling and Chenin Blanc, and, then there was Cabernet Sauvignon and Zinfandel, etc. But it was, it was fantastic. And so that was my introduction. And then I worked my way up the ladder and I became the cellar master. And then I started taking classes at UC Davis, and sort of the rest is history. I mean, I've bounced around the industry a little bit, but I've been in the industry for over 40 years now. So, I mean, I know I only look like I'm 20, but
Well, that's great. And you mentioned there that you're in the Livermore Valley, correct?
That's correct.
So could you tell us a little bit about the Livermore Valley for people who aren't familiar with it? I mean, when we think of California wines, right, typically we're thinking Napa, Sonoma, but you're actually more east of San Francisco, correct?
That's absolutely correct. So we're actually slightly southeast of San Francisco. The unusual thing about our valley is the valley runs east to west rather than north to south like Sonoma and Napa and most of the other wine growing valleys in California, actually, or at least in the coastal regions. For me, it's really about the weather. We do get warm in Livermore, just like they do in the Napa and Sonoma areas. But I feel like our proximity to the San Francisco Bay, and then also east of the Altamont Pass, which, is famous for the 1969 concert with the Rolling Stones and all that. So it's really hot east of the Altamont, which is the San Joaquin Valley. And then the heat of the day draws the cooler air from the Bay Area in through Livermore. And so in the evenings, it'll be hot in the day, but the evenings are very, very cool. And that's actually really good for growing wine grapes.
So you've been making wine for 40 years, you said?
Yeah, a little over, yeah.
Over 40 years. Now, out of those 40 years, what is one of your favorite memories from being a winemaker and working in the industry?
Yeah, I have a lot of them, that's for sure. I have a lot of fond memories I can't even mention on, TV or whatnot. But one of my, fondest memories is actually, I left the Winty family in 2004, and then I went to Bonnie Doon Vineyard in Santa Cruz, thus the Santa Cruz t-shirt, right? So, um, and got a chance to work with Randall Graham for about 2 or 3 years, and then, which was a fantastic experience because he's a very dynamic person, very intelligent, definitely thinks outside the box, and I learned a ton from that guy, you know. Then as I was transitioning away, because at the time Bonnie Doon sold the Big House brand to the wine group, and then, you know, I basically went from making 500,000 cases a year to all of a sudden consulting, as it were, you know, as I left, and then you know, making like 200 cases a year, you know, kind of thing. And then I ended up in the Napa Valley, and ironically, I was introduced to John Caldwell through Randall, and then my partners at Picasso Vineyards, we started making our wine at Caldwell Vineyard in Napa Valley. And my experience at that cave and making wine was just fantastic. And it was a really interesting thing to be able to go from, you know, the mentality of making, you know, 500,000 cases where, you know, a certain lot of wine maybe doesn't make the cut, but you figure out how to blend it away, kind of thing. That mentality to everything has to be perfect, you know, and there's no blending away of, you know, mediocre to less than mediocre wine. And you don't have that luxury anymore. And, you know, everything costs a lot more, and you know, like just trying to make sure that the economics still work and all those things. But it was just a fantastic experience. And the mentality of bringing in fruit and hand sorting it, and that was just a great time in my life. But I gotta admit, I mean, I've had a great time in my life.
Yeah, I like how you talk about that contrast, because I actually worked for a winery where the wine was really high quality, right, but smaller batch. And I worked in Germany actually and did a harvest over there, and that was really cool. I loved every minute of it, but it was they made so much wine. It was just such a grand scale that sometimes, you know what, while you're in the middle of the process in the cellar working these massive tanks, you kind of forget sometimes that you're making wine. You know, it's just so factory, it's just so much that it's, you know, but like, yeah, so that is an interesting contrast for sure.
Yeah, well, especially like because when I was younger, I, you know, I worked in the cellar at Wente when I first started there. I actually started, you know, driving a tractor, and, you know, I used to kid around that I started on a tractor and now I'm back on the tractor, you know. So, but you know, I was basically taking pumice out to the field and spreading it in the vineyard. Was one of the first jobs I had, which I gotta admit that wasn't so bad either at the time, because I didn't know anything about anything, you know. But the problem with the big factory job is when you're in the cellar, you basically, you know, you spread pumice, you know, for 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day or whatever it is. Or, you know, or you fill barrels for 8 hours a day, 10, you know, but you basically do one job. And the nice thing about being in the small, you know, the small lot world is you deal with the pumice, and you deal with the barrels, and you deal with the, you know, the racking and the fermenting and the, you know, the filtering and the bottling and the blah 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 and the blah 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 and the blah, and guess what, you get to taste a lot.
Yeah, that always helps.
I mean, that's, I think, what I like the most. And then interestingly enough, I've always thought, I was thankful that all that being said, is that I was thankful that I got into the wine production business, because throughout the year your job sort of changes, right? You're not pounding nails every day, you know, like cutting a 2x4 and then, you know, nailing it together every day, or, you know, mixing concrete every day. Some days, you're harvesting fruit, you know, and pressing and processing. Some days, you know, you're getting things into barrels and that kind of thing. And then some days you're, you know, blending, and then some days you're filtering, and some days you're throughout the season, as the wine grows and becomes something, you know, it's sort of the job changes with the wine, which is cool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That is absolutely one of the great things about being in the wine industry. And then on top of that, not every single year is the same, right? I mean, it depends on what Mother Nature gives us, because it depends what's coming from the vineyards that determines what you're going to do in the cellar at the end of the day, right? So, yeah, you definitely don't get bored. And then one thing too that you do a lot of, or especially you as a head winemaker now, is you're also interacting with people, clients, people visiting the winery. I mean, they always want to talk to the winemaker, right? So you get a wide array of things to do in your career, for sure.
There's no doubt about that. And then I got, you know, I mean, you brought up the vineyard, and actually this picture behind me is kind of interesting because that's my Cabernet Sauvignon. And although it's an older picture, I was on the vineyard today, and we are starting veraison, which is a little bit early, actually. Ironically, I'm thinking we've had a cool summer so far in Livermore Valley compared to, you know, others, you know, and and I do spend a lot of time in the vineyard, and that, you know, that season changes as well. You know, you have pruning season, you have, you know, fertilization, you have, you know, then you have, you know, when the bud break, and then, you know, you have a spray season, and you have, you know, canopy management season, and, you know, of course, harvest. And so there's a lot to do. And then, of course, irrigation is, you know, here in California, you know, we have to, I mean, we get to irrigate, and we're on drip irrigation, and we like to manage our canopies, you know, via, you know, irrigation management. And so, I mean, it's crazy between the winery and the vineyard, and then, like you said, the socializing. It's actually, you know, it does work out to be a full-time job.
Oh, that's right. What about your wines? What do you want to share with people about your wine in particular? I know what we'll do too is we'll put the link to your guys' website in the description, and share it with on our social media platform, because I saw on your website you guys, well, first off, people can go there to find out more about you, but you also have a wine club and all that good stuff, I believe I saw. So people can definitely, we'll send people your way for sure. But what should we know about your wines in particular?
Well, the history at McGrail. So, you know, I mean, I mentioned that I started at Wente. That was 1979, and 2000, around 2006, 2007, I met the McGrail family, and at the time they had just recently planted their estate vineyard, and they were going to dabble in making wine, and so I started consulting for them. And then by 2008 they opened the door to the tasting room, and then 2009 I was officially hired full time as the winemaker. And so since then we've grown to whatever monstrosity we've become. But you know, the original vineyard was a Cabernet Sauvignon vineyard, and continues today, Cabernet Sauvignon. And so that was really the grape variety that we've been known for, and sort of set, I call it the genesis of the brand, as it were. And in 2012, we won the sweepstakes award with the San Francisco Chronicle, best red wine out of, you know, 5,000 or 6,000 wines or whatever it was. And I'll never forget, because Rachel McGrail, who is our like accounting person, one of the family members, you know, she called me and said, "Hey, we won some award, whatever it was," you know. And you know, she said the Chronicle, blah blah blah, and I just shrugged it off and went, "Oh yeah, no big deal, whatever. Yeah, that's nice, you know." And you know, unfortunately, or fortunately, or unfortunately, I mean, I've had accolades in the past, and you know, so I wasn't very excited. I wasn't necessarily excited about it. And then that evening, Jim McGrail, the founder of the winery, called me, and I figured, if he's calling me, it must be a big deal. And so then I realized what a big deal it was, and that really, for our brand, we exploded. So we were making, like, 1,000 cases or something like that at the time, or 1,500 total with Chardonnay and everything else. And we normally took 12 months to sell out the vintage, and we sold out in like 6 months. And then Heather McGrail, who's the president, and Jim and Ginger's daughter, and I were looking at each other. What are we going to do? Because you want to keep the doors open, and so we ended up buying another brand that I was making wine for, and that kind of got us through the rest of the year. That was the Picasso Vineyards. But the idea was you don't want to close your doors because people will forget about you. But my favorite part about this whole story is that we looked at each other and we said, because we age our Cabernet for 30 months in barrel. So we could have easily changed that to 18 months, right? And then ramped up, production. But and the other thing is we could have raised the price, and we didn't do that either. Because we looked at each other and said, we're in this for the long haul, not the one, you could disappoint a bunch of people by trying to take advantage in the short term, but then you lose your customers long term. And so I think we hit it right on that front. And then in the meantime, we've always made a little bit of Chardonnay. Ginger McGrail loves Chardonnay, and that's her favorite go-to wine. So we've always done that. And then in 2015, we bought a vineyard on Tesla Road that had about 11 acres planted to some different red grape varieties, including Merlot, Malbec, and Cab Sauv, a couple of Portuguese varieties. And then we planted another 12 acres and added some Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Chardonnay, and Cabernet Franc. So now we have all 5 Bordeaux red grape varieties, although now I hear Touriga Nacional counts, but ironically, we had that already planted. And so we think of ourselves as a Bordeaux house but we make Chardonnay too.
No, that's a great story. I mean, to win best red wine out of about, what'd you say, 5,000-6,000 other wineries?
Something like that, yeah.
That's crazy. Congratulations on that one. That's awesome.
Thank you. The funny part about it was we actually had other wineries call us and bought the wine, and then we actually had people, like restaurants and places like that or whatever, that wanted to buy our wine. And it was kind of funny because, part of my career in a former life, I was one of the people that was beating the doors down, trying to sell my wine out in the marketplace. And, these restaurant guys are all like, whatever, I've got 7 million people trying to sell me wine, why are you special? And so, and I'm like, yeah, but my wine's good, or whatever. I mean, whatever you try to say, but so, I mean, I get how it is out in the world. And then to have them actually calling me, I was like, oh, that's kind of a switch, but it's a nice switch. I'll take it,
I'll take it. Right. Well, hey, Mark, this has been a great story, great interview. I love hearing your story and everything. I always like to end my interviews with one simple question, and we kind of touch on it throughout the interview, but in summary, what is your favorite thing about wine?
You mean besides drinking it?
Yeah. Besides drinking a bottle before going to bed.
Yeah, well, my favorite thing about wine is that I feel like it's part of the meal, it's part of the family. I have a huge family of friends and family and whatnot that all enjoy wine and growing wine and talking about wine and making wine or just drinking wine. I just feel like wine it's like a community, I mean, there's a community of people that truly love wine and appreciate wine. I think it's very special. And of course, moderation is the key. Like too much of anything, ice cream's great, but too much is bad. But yeah, I love the community part of wine.
Yeah, that's well said. And I say it too. I say wine brings people together. And I mean, you see it on on a big scale, because people are always coming to your winery and you're dealing with people like that. So, and when I went and did my travels and worked harvests around the world, meeting people that, you know, from different countries and things like that, it just, and you think about it, well, we're all here together because of wine, you know. So it's a great point. Great point. Well, perfect, Mark. I really appreciate you being on the show today. Look forward to sharing your story with everyone, and we'll put a link in the description to send people your way so they can learn more about you and join your wine club and go from there.
Hey man, thank you so much. I really enjoyed our time, and really nice to meet you actually face to face.
I hope you enjoyed this week's interview with a winemaker. Be sure to tune in next week as I'll be interviewing another winemaker. I hope you will join our journey around the wine world by subscribing to this channel. Be sure to like this video and share it with a friend. We'll see you next week. Thank you.